The breach didn't rip, it shivered. Not with violence, but inevitability. Like the universe exhaled wrong. A filament of light twisted against the void just past Saturn's graveyard, pulsing like a slow heartbeat against the black. It shimmered for 17 minutes, untouched, unregistered by any alien sensory array. But the Terran deep space relay caught it in the corner of a malfunctioning grav lens. Not because it was built to, but because it wasn't. And that's always how humans found the impossible. Aboard the salvage frigate Wendigo Drift, crew slept badly. The ship thrummed with post-warp tinnitus, and the recycled oxygen carried that faint, copper blood tang no one could ever explain. Captain Isolde Vance didn't dream anymore, hadn't since the Trappist collapse. But she remembered dreaming. That was worse. She hovered above the nav console, sweat frosting the back of her neck despite the low temp cycle. The relay was spitting ghost readings again. "Isolde," rasped the voice behind her, "it's awake again." She didn't turn, just clenched her jaw. How many minutes this time? 23. Longer than last breach. So it's learning. From the medical bay, a wet coughing fit spiraled upward. Corporal Reed again, lungs shot from alien spores and stubborn refusal to die. He'd been deadweight since Enceladus, and still refused to be airlocked. Typical. In the shadows behind Isolde, the ship's alien envoy flickered its many-lensed eyes, mandibles clicking nervously. Kithari of the Vec Communion, an alliance of post-organic xenopsychologists who believed they could speak with gods, or contain them. But the thing past Saturn was no god. It was a mistake, a cosmic recursion, a feedback loop of collapsing observer realities. And it had spoken to one species only, humanity. Kithari whispered, "It shouldn't be responding to thought forms this early. You said the bleed event was contained." "It was," Isolde growled, "until it wasn't." She stabbed a gloved finger at the sensor display. "We left Earth's orbital plane months ago, so why the hell is the ghost signal getting stronger?" Kithari's chitin flexed uneasily. "Because your kind keeps remembering it." A distant howl. Not from the entity, but the brig. The others had heard it too. Isolde drew her sidearm. Standard issue pulse. Useless against anything above Tier 5 biologicals, but comfort had its uses. They moved through the underlit corridor like a dream chasing itself down an endless hall. Pipes wept condensation. The ship's feral oxygen processors muttered to themselves in archaic error code dialects. And somewhere behind them, Reed kept coughing. Harder now, like his lungs were trying to escape. The brig door wasn't locked. It should have been. The prisoner was standing, awake, eyes open, but not looking. Sergeant Cora Fenn, combat evac specialist, officially KIA at the ruin of Vega Minor. Except here she was, breathing, bleeding, smiling without emotion. Kithari hissed, "This is impossible. We watched her body collapse into fragmentary time dilation." Isolde didn't lower the pulse gun. "Yeah," she whispered, "and we buried her twice." Cora's voice came out wrong, like a human throat mimicking something older. "You remember me," she said. "I remember my sergeant," Isolde answered. "No, you remember it. The breach. The eye." Kithari lurched forward. "How do you know about the eye?" Cora's head tilted, bones cracking, neck muscles trembling to hold form. "It told me. Or maybe I told myself. From the wrong side of time." She stepped forward, not with aggression, with inevitability. The eye didn't open. We did. It just looked back. Isolde fired, twice. Blue pulses lit the chamber. Cora's body absorbed both, staggered, then stood tall. Unburned, unchanged. "Your weapons," she said, "only work on what belongs to this continuity." Kithari began muttering psionic shielding chants, folding its body inward like a broken telescope. "We need to lock the room, fold the dimensional seam, and trap her memory echo inside." But Cora was already gone. No teleportation, no warp shimmer, just absence. The brig was less than before, and so was Isolde. She stumbled out, heart slamming, Kithari trailing, its mental field crackling with panic. The Wendigo drift shook, once, hard, like something massive had just blinked into their layer of space, then decided to stay. In the cockpit, Reed was already there, bleeding from the eyes. "I saw it," he murmured, "on the other side. It has our faces." "What the hell are you talking about?" Isolde snapped. Reed turned slowly, smiled with all his teeth. "You don't remember yet," he said, "but you will." The light outside the ship began to curl, not bend, curl, like space was giving up on being three-dimensional, opting for something more ancient, a topology that made Kithari begin to scream in three voices. It wasn't a weapon, it wasn't even hostile, it was curious. And that's what terrified them most. Humans remember pain. But this thing remembered remembering. It looped. It nested timelines within memory shards and wore the faces of those it consumed. And somehow, it had learned from them. The final log on Isolde's screen blinked alive. Bioform, human response to cosmic paradox, non-standard prediction model collapse, confirmed observation result, error. They smiled at oblivion. She read the line twice, then looked out the viewport and smiled back. The breach folded like a dying star folds gravity, without warning, without logic. Every alarm on Wendigo Drift lit up, then blinked out in the same breath. Internal gravity spiked to 1.8 Gs, then fell to 0. A floating wrench slammed into the side of Kithari's head with a sickening crack. The alien flailed, weightless, bleeding something luminous and amber. Isolde didn't fall. She braced, always braced, because somewhere in her spine, she'd started recognizing the rhythm of impossible things. Above them, something spoke without language. It suggested a feeling, like remembering a word you never knew from a dream you hadn't had yet. Reed's voice came from the cockpit. "I told you," he said, calm. "It learned our shapes." When Isolde burst through the cockpit hatch, she saw him, slumped in the pilot's chair, smiling, and bleeding from ears, eyes, and mouth. A fog of metallic mist hovered just above his forehead like some kind of whispering halo. But he was talking to it. "I told you about coffee, about blood, about love and locked doors. I told you why we keep getting up, even when everything screams stay down." Isolde leveled the pulse gun. "Reed, shut the hell up." He turned. Something in his pupils twisted, like each eye was a corridor too long to fit inside a skull. "It doesn't want to kill us, Captain. It wants to understand us. You don't threaten what you worship. You become it. Step away from the console. It's not just a breach. It's a mirror. And we already stepped through." Suddenly the viewport darkened, not from shadows, from inversion. The stars inverted polarity. Space itself turned concave. And where the eye once shimmered in silent pulses, now a form took shape. Not limbs, not symmetry, just intent. A thought loop cast into the physical. Manifested recursion. The kind of presence that makes your ancestors scream through your bloodstream. Kithari stumbled in behind her, dragging one shattered limb, mandibles stuttering. This is not observation," it rasped. "This is synthesis." Isolde ignored him, locked eyes with Reed. "What did you give it?" "Everything," he whispered. I let it watch my grief, my memory of my brother's death, my first drink after Enceladus, the time I buried our dog under Martian soil and swore I'd never cry. He paused, as if somewhere inside he was still reliving it. I let it feel it all. Kithari shrieked, "You anthropocentric fool! You fed it emotion, pure, unquantified trauma. You taught a multiversal parasite how to feel sorrow. That's a contagion." Reed laughed, and it was not a sound meant for sanity. "Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe we're the virus now." The ship buckled, this time not from external force, but internal dissonance. Panels flickered with incorrect data. Navigation readouts looped back into childhood memories. The life support monitor was now displaying someone's heartbeat, someone not on board. Names appeared across the HUD. Jules, Daria, Elle, Mom. Every dead name Isolde had refused to remember. It knew. No, this isn't possible," she whispered. "Why not?" Reed smiled faintly. "You remembered them. It listened. It's building you." And then, like peeling back skin from a scream, the ship opened. Not physically, conceptually. And they were somewhere else. Earth, but not any Earth they'd known. Sky, green, oceans still. No cities, no scars, just silence and statues. Statues of humans, carved in anguish, in awe, in fear, in defiance. And standing at the center, impossibly tall, made of interlaced memory strands and sculpted grief, was a monument made in her image, Isolde Vance. Kithari's exoskin convulsed. This is artificial, a psychomimetic construct, sampled from collective trauma. We're inside a gestalt hallucination. But Isolde stepped forward, dazed. She reached out to the base of the monument, where a phrase was etched in every language she'd never spoken. She didn't stop. A child's voice echoed in the space. "You remembered the pain, so we made a place to hold it." Isolde turned. A small girl stood barefoot in the grassless field. No pupils, just liquid reflection in her eyes. The girl didn't blink. "You survived what you should not have survived," the girl said. "And you made us wonder, why?" Isolde lowered her weapon, voice rough. "Because survival isn't about permission, it's about refusal." The girl nodded. "That is what makes you dangerous." Then she tilted her head, like Cora had done. "You are not weapons, but you make them. From memory, from fire, from instinct. You birth meaning from entropy. That is why the others feared you." Isolde felt a crack in her chest. Something unspoken wanted to crawl out. What others? Those who came before the Eye, before you. They tried to harvest understanding, but when they looked into their own reflection, they saw nothing. Reed stepped beside her, face ashen, voice barely a whisper. "It built us a mausoleum of memory and made it a temple." The girl smiled, something impossibly sad. "But we don't want worship," she raised a hand. "We want to be human." The green sky twisted, not storm, not collapse. A new observer entered the field. Kithari screamed before he saw it, because he remembered it first. Something older than the Eye, and angrier. Something that hadn't been invited into human memory. Something the Eye had kept locked behind quantum scar tissue. Isolde dropped to one knee, blood from her ears now. "What's happening?" The girl turned to her, face frozen. "It found us," she said. "It found you." The monument cracked. Across the horizon, the false Earth began to fracture, and from the abyss beneath it rose a noise like bones being ground into music. A new phrase burned across the sky. "You should not have taught it to hurt." The sky collapsed like a wound folding inward. The girl, the not girl, the memory shell, shattered first. No scream, no resistance. Just a look, a very human look. Fear. Isolde felt it in her throat before she saw it. The thing coming through wasn't bound by shape or substance. It was before shape, before cause. Not a predator, not even a god. A correction. And it hated humans for not staying corrected. Kithari convulsed beside her, mandibles twitching spasmodically. No, this isn't the Eye. This is a retrocausal cleanser, a multiversal failsafe. It was never meant to awaken. You triggered it. Reed turned to Isolde. You taught it grief, and you gave it yours, she spat. We both lit the match. The false earth cracked in perfect concentric rings. Every tree, every statue, every imitation breath peeled away in layers of disintegration. Behind it, black. Not void, absence. Then came the voice. Not in air, not in mind. It rippled through marrow. Undo. The word came with force. Not pressure, not violence. Regret. It regretted what they were, what they'd become. It wanted to forget them as punishment. Reed clutched his temples, staggering. It's trying to erase us, retroactively, from every version of reality where we mattered. Then we give it a reason to remember. Isolde lifted the pulse rifle, but it jammed instantly, liquefied, rewound, melted into its previous components. Brass, carbon, thought. Technology's failing, Kithari gasped. Our tools rely on sequential logic. This being precedes sequence. It unravels cause-effect chains the way you'd unlace boots. So we fight with something it doesn't understand, Isolde said. Reed laughed, hoarse and broken. And what would that be? Magic? Hope? No, she said. Rage. She stepped forward, eyes locked on the distortion in the air. You want to undo us? She shouted. Then start with me. The sky pulsed. Name yourself. She bared her teeth. Isolde Vance. Last survivor of Wendigo Drift, born on a fractured earth that never forgot how to bleed. The thing you're trying to erase? That's me. That's us. The nightmare in your reflection. Silence. Then, observed. It saw her, and for one moment, 1 microsecond across all space-time, it hesitated. A crack ran through the construct, and out of the darkness, the Eye returned. It hadn't fled, it had waited. It reformed behind the erasure field like a second sun. The child's voice, fractured but still echoing, came through. You broke it. You made it pause. It doesn't understand why you refuse to die. I don't need it to understand, Isolde said. I need it to remember me. That's how humans survive. We build myth from trauma. The Eye surged, not as an attack, but as a witness. It projected her, memories from every instance across the multiverse. Isolde burning on Europa. Isolde strangling an alien officer to protect a child. Isolde folding her brother's corpse and refusing to blink. Billions of echoes, billions of deaths, billions of refusals. And then, Kithari stepped forward, face contorted, chest heaving. I was wrong, he rasped. You're not dangerous because of violence. You're dangerous because of meaning. He took out the memory stitcher embedded in his thorax, a bioorganic recording unit used to preserve witness testimony. He ripped it out, blood spraying in pulses. I submit this record to the continuum. Let it be known that I, Kithari of the Ool, have seen a human weaponize memory. He collapsed, twitching. But his words floated, suspended, encoded. The Eye absorbed them, and something shifted. The erasure force, the multiversal cleaner, stopped. Not broken, not defeated, but now, curious. It unfolded. Not spatially, but conceptually. Layers of its intent peeled back. They saw it, the failed civilizations, the erased timelines, the countless attempts by other species to impose understanding on the incomprehensible. None of them had ever used grief as a weapon. None had ever refused to collapse. None had said, "Erase me," while bleeding memory into the dirt. Only humans. The eye glowed brighter now, reshaped by what it had learned. Not monstrous, not divine, something in between, a witness. The dark thing pulsed once more, a final ripple. Then it withdrew. Not vanished, not banished, just watching. It had no counter-argument. They'd made their case, and for now, they won. The ground reformed beneath them. The false earth faded. The Wendigo drift pulled itself together atom by atom, stitch by stitch, somewhere between entropy and refusal. Kithari lay dying in Reed's lap. "They will ask what we saw," he croaked. Isolde knelt. "Tell them we bled into the infinite, and it blinked." Kithari smiled, black ichor dripping from his mandibles. "And it saw a dog?" They turned. The bridge of the Wendigo drift, restored now, echoed with a low growl. In the corner, a massive earth wolf dog, sleek and muscular, snarled at nothing. Reed blinked. "That's my dog." From memory, it was wagging its tail, covered in blood, teeth glinting, and the eye glowed, as if it understood, at last, the terrible, beautiful logic of loving something that could destroy you. There was no sun in this place, only a vast, diffuse light, like grief shining from an unknown source. The Wendigo drift hovered in quantum stasis, stitched between threads of potential time, held aloft not by engines, but by the witness of memory. The eye watched still, no longer a weapon, not yet an ally, and the wolf, Reed's wolf, stood sentinel at the ship's foredeck, hackles raised at dimensions no longer symmetrical. Isolde's knuckles ached. She hadn't unclenched her fists since the thing withdrew. "We're not dead," she muttered. Reed sat cross-legged beside the helm, staring at the curled dog. "No, but we've broken something. Or, worse, we've shown something it can't unsee." Kithari lay in medpod stasis. Alien fluids circulated through his split thorax, life flickering in pulses. The medpod's diagnostic system was half ghoul, half human jury rig. "This blend," the automedic voice droned, "is not medically sanctioned." "Good," Isolde snapped. "Neither is reality." The crew, or what was left of it, regrouped. 3 humans, 2 ghoul survivors, 1 wolf, 1 eye, and, outside the viewport, nothing familiar. What replaced the stars was an impossible structure, rotating in paradox, shaped by logic failure and memory error. A fortress, a mind, a place not built, but willed. Reed whispered, "The Godhead. It's real." No one moved. No one had ever confirmed its existence. The last known expedition vanished mid-broadcast, the last words being, "It's not a place, it's a conclusion." Now here they were, orbiting the unspeakable. "What is it?" asked Tressa, the xenolinguist, who hadn't spoken since the eye's judgment. Isolde stepped toward the screen. "A weapon." "No," Reed corrected, voice trembling. "A courtroom. The place where species are judged not by their survival, but by what they do when they shouldn't survive." The wolf growled again. And then the transmission began. Not through radio, through memory. Each of them, simultaneously, began to remember lives they hadn't lived. Isolde standing on the surface of a shattered Saturn moon, howling defiance with a throat full of ash. Reed operating on himself, wide awake, under alien fire, singing an Earth lullaby. Tressa convincing a sentient asteroid not to suicide against Mars by reciting poetry. Impossible memories. Real emotions. They're inserting echoes, Reed gasped. Versions of us from collapsed timelines. Data points. Evidence. The eye pulsed once, and the door opened. A rift. A summons. The crew barely had time to armor up before the pull began. Teleportation through psychological signature. They weren't moving through space. They were moving through belief. The Godhead's interior was an architecture of concepts. Doorways shaped like regret. Stairwells made of stacked apologies. Columns humming in sorrowful tones. Symbols flickered along the walls. Ancient earth glyphs, alien sigils, DNA strands, myth fragments. Isolde looked up at a vaulted ceiling displaying the first photograph ever taken of a human crying. "How does it know this?" she whispered. Tressa answered without looking. "Because it doesn't record data, it records meaning. And we've been bleeding meaning since we left Earth." A voice greeted them, not words, a syntax shift. Every species present heard the same thing, in the shape most damning to them. "You have infected the multiverse with memory. Your appeal must now be heard." Figures coalesced from the walls. Judges, not beings, representations of disbelief. A feline predator that blinked backwards. A cloud of rust-colored nanites shaped like betrayal. A suit of armor filled with teeth. One stepped forward. Its voice cracked like thawing ice. "You call yourselves human. Define the term." Reed opened his mouth, then stopped. Isolde stepped forward. "We're the species that should have died 100 times, but kept loving each other anyway." Silence. Tressa added, "We're the mistake that keeps reoccurring because the universe doesn't know how to file trauma properly." Stillness. The wolf barked. The judges recoiled slightly. One hissed. "The apex pet. We had heard, but thought it metaphor." Reed smirked. "You're scared of a dog?" "No," said the judge of teeth. "We are scared of a species that keeps such things close, that sleeps beside predators, that makes monsters into family." "And what's your alternative?" Isolde barked. "A sterile galaxy full of logic and nothing worth crying over?" The judges murmured. Behind them, images flickered again. Not war, not conquest, but a human mother dying to keep her newborn alive in vacuum. A paraplegic boy teaching an alien diplomat how to laugh through pain. A dying soldier whispering his enemy's name so they wouldn't die alone. Grief. Loyalty. Stubborn, beautiful irrationality. "I move that judgment be delayed," the rust cloud said. "The humans are not statistically coherent." "That's the point," Tressa whispered. "We're not meant to be." The walls shook. The eye reappeared, larger now, embedded in the courtroom ceiling. Its gaze was neutral, measured, watching the judges and the crew. And then, from somewhere unseen, a second voice. Cracked, familiar, human. "I object." They turned and saw Commander Arlen Vance, Isolde's brother, dead 5 years, confirmed in 20 timelines, but here, alive, wearing their father's jacket. Isolde's throat seized. "What the hell is this?" "I don't know," Arlen said softly, "but if they're judging humanity by echoes, then I'm the one who never let go." The judges leaned forward, and the wolf began to growl again, low, warning. Because something else had entered with Arlen, something that looked human, but moved like a mistake in perception. Behind him, a copy of Isolde herself, eyes black as unspoken grief. She was standing there herself, but not. The duplicate Isolde moved as if drawn in ink and regret, her silhouette smudged by causality errors. Behind her eyes, the cold depth of unwanted knowledge. "That's not me," Isolde whispered, but no one answered. The room vibrated with a frequency too low for hearing, a feeling, not a sound. The judges turned inward, whispering to one another in vibrations that shimmered down the bones. The eye dimmed slightly. The other Isolde smiled with her teeth, but not her eyes. "I am what you become," she said. "If you choose vengeance over grief, if you answer entropy with cruelty, if you take what this place offers." "Offers? What?" Tressa asked, voice cracking. "Power. Through clarity. Through surrender." The eye pulsed again. Arlen moved between them, facing the judges now. "This tribunal claims to weigh humanity's right to exist, but it invited ghosts to testify. Copies, specters. Is that how you measure worth?" "You misunderstand," said the judge of teeth. "She is not a ghost. She is a forked truth, a fragment of future certainty. And she is here because your kind has splintered possibility." "Then seal her off," Isolde snapped. "We didn't choose her." "Not yet," the other Isolde said. "But your pain wants me. Your rage needs me. I'm what happens when you decide the only justice left is annihilation." Reed stepped forward. His face was pale but steady. "If she's a potential future, we need to prove her wrong. That's what this tribunal is, isn't it? You want to see whether we lean toward creation or revenge." "You've already failed that test," the rust cloud murmured. "You weaponized the wolf." "She's not a weapon," Isolde growled. "She's loyalty, with teeth." The wolf stepped beside her, pressing its shoulder to her knee. The judge's murmuring grew louder, flickering in alien time signatures. Images pulsed across the chamber walls: Earth's wars, medical improvisations, brutal weather events, and human laughter in the aftermath. "You contradict yourselves," said the judge of regret. "You seek peace, but preserve predators. You mourn death, but glorify sacrifice. You crave understanding, but survive by misdirection." "That's the whole point," Reed said, quiet now. "We don't make sense, but we still choose, every damn day, to keep living. That's the miracle. That's the problem you can't solve." The eye brightened slightly, just enough to cast shadows behind the judges. Something was moving, stirring, something watching them. Isolde's duplicate stepped closer. "You say survival is sacred," she said, "but your kind weaponizes memory. You've created languages from trauma, rituals from failure. You've turned grief into currency. You carry your dead in your blood." "Yes," Isolde whispered, "and we'll carry them all the way to the end of time if we have to." Then the floor cracked. A seismic scream rippled through the courtroom, deep and inward, as if reality itself had hiccuped. Arlen staggered. His form glitched. Static fizzled from his fingertips. "No," he said, "not now. I'm not finished." His voice warbled. "Izzy, listen to me. The eye isn't watching to judge, it's watching to learn. It didn't create the Godhead." His body flickered, fading. "We did." And then he was gone. Only the jacket remained, draped on the floor like a funeral flag. Isolde fell to her knees, shaking. "You said he was dead," she whispered. "Why did he come back now?" The other Isolde crouched beside her. "Because he's your tether, your last connection to what you were, and the Godhead wanted to see if you'd sever it." Tressa began shaking. "This isn't a trial, it's a conversion. They're testing to see if we'll become something else, something like them." Reed gritted his teeth. So what do we do? The wolf barked once, sharp, urgent. The eye turned its gaze toward the judges. For the first time, its pupil dilated, and then it spoke. Not in memory, not in image, but in raw sensory thought. You were not the first species to reach this point. You are the first to walk in with your monsters leashed and your grief unhidden. Silence. The rust cloud broke formation. It drifted downward, brushing the floor with trails of oxidized light. You are pain evolved, it said. We cannot predict what you will do. That is unsettling. The eye glowed brighter. The walls fell away, and suddenly they were back aboard the Wendigo drift. Kithari gasped awake in the medpod, thrashing. The eye, he coughed. It showed me. Isolde turned to him, eyes rimmed in exhaustion. Slow down. What did it show you? Kithari trembled. Earth. Not now, not yours, but close. A version where you burned the stars to stay warm. You turned a pulsar into a furnace. You screamed into deep time for someone to answer. He swallowed hard. And someone answered. Tressa stared into nothing. Then the eye's not the threat. The threat is what's watching the eye. Isolde looked down at her brother's jacket. Inside the collar, a patch, handmade. It read, "We survive ugly." Her fingers clenched it tight. "We have to go back in," she said, "into the Godhead." Reed blinked. "Why?" "Because we were pulled out too early. That wasn't a trial. That was a test. They didn't finish." The wolf growled, ears back. Then the ship shuddered. Tressa ran to the screen. Oh my God! They were no longer orbiting the Godhead. They were no longer anywhere mapped. Before them stood a monument of ruin, a derelict planet wrapped in iron roots, orbiting a black hole shaped like a Mobius scream. And from the planet's surface, something was rising. Dozens of them, figures, all wearing human faces, all identical. Each one, Isolde. But their eyes were hollow, their hands burned. The comm crackled. A voice, not Isolde's, spoke. "We remember what you forgot. We are every choice you didn't make. And now, we're coming home." The bridge of the Wendigo drift groaned like a wounded animal, warning of imminent collapse. Isolde stared out the viewport at the planet below, her own face staring back from dozens of burning-eyed replicas. They weren't wearing armor, they weren't speaking in tongues, they were silent, marching in unison across a cracked wasteland wrapped in dead stars and rusted orbitals. Reed was already running diagnostics. This isn't a planet, it's a memory construct, an echo of Earth distorted by entropic recursion. Tressa whispered, "You mean it's imagining Earth?" "No," Kithari rasped from the medpod. "It's not imagining, it's grieving. That thing down there is made of every version of humanity that lost, and it remembers." On the screen, one of the Isolde replicas twitched, then snapped her own neck. The others kept marching, undisturbed. Isolde turned away. "How many versions of me are down there?" "Too many," Kithari said softly, "and they're bleeding upward through time. They're not trapped down there, they're leaking." The comms panel blinked. A voice crackled through, modulated and fragmented. "We remember fire. We remember the promise. You lied to yourself to survive. We became what you denied." The wolf growled low, the fur along her back rippling like water against gravity. Tressa backed away from the console. "That's not them talking, it's the Godhead. It's fractured, processing timelines like sensory inputs." Reed leaned in. "No, it's worse. It's reconstructing a persona from the scraps we left behind. Every false memory, every suppressed thought, it's building us from our own debris. Suddenly, one of the Isolde replicas looked up, right at them, and smiled. Not cruelly, not maliciously, but with infinite pity. A light flared in her eyes. The ship lurched, time warped. Tressa fell sideways but didn't hit the floor. She hung there, like reality had momentarily forgotten gravity existed. Then, a fracture. A rift carved through the air, screaming in colors no eye should process. And from within that wound stepped something not human, not alien, not even sentient in the way consciousness understands itself. It wore a shifting cloak of carbon shadow. Its face was a warping field, reflections of the crew's expressions flickering faster than thought. Identity, undecidable, it said. Host vessel, fractured. Temporal chain, severed. Humanity, multiple variants detected. Reed reached for his weapon. The wolf snarled. The entity cocked its head. We are the archivists of unbecoming. We collect futures that fail to instantiate. You are infected with recursion. Prepare for extraction. No, Isolde said. We're not done. You're not yourselves, it countered. You are collapsed waveform echoes. You are grief in feedback loop. Tressa stepped forward. Maybe, but we're still choosing. Your choices are anomalies, unstable, unrepeatable. That's called being human, she snapped. Something shifted in the entity's form. It paused. For one perfect breath of time, the ship was still. Then the voice of the Eye returned, not from outside, but from within each of their heads. There is no salvation in understanding, but there is meaning in resistance. And the Eye pulled them all back in. Reality bent around a scream that had no source. They were back inside the Godhead, but it was no longer a courtroom. It was a funeral. The walls were obsidian mirrors, and in every reflection, Earth dying a different death. One burned, one drowned, one shattered from within as gravity turned cannibal. In the center, a casket. Inside, Isolde. Not a replica, not a copy. Her, breathing, trapped. Reed reached forward. His fingers passed through the glass. This isn't time travel, he said. It's regret turned spatial. We're inside a physical representation of all the futures where we lost you. Isolde's hand trembled. What if I never made it out? What if I already died, and I'm just remembering the wrong ending? You didn't, Kithari said. How do you know? Because you're still hurting. Dead minds don't mourn themselves. Suddenly, the other coffins around the chamber cracked open. Dozens of other Isoldes rose. Some wept, some screamed, some had no faces left at all. All of them stared at her like she was the aberration. You think you were the original? One asked. No one's original. We're all just different failures of hope. You think resistance matters? Said another. You're a fiction born from refusal. You think love protects you? Whispered the one whose mouth had been sewn shut. And then, all at once, they knelt. Every single one. Not to Isolde, to the wolf. It stepped into the center of the chamber, and its shadow stretched until it touched each coffin. From the walls, a low hum. The Eye. It was laughing. A single memory thread shimmered across the floor. Arlen's voice, echoing across time. We made the Godhead, not as gods, as orphans. We filled it with all our endings, hoping one of them would be kind. And finally, the central casket opened. The real Isolde reached out and touched her own dead face. Everything inverted. Light turned to sound, time reversed inside out. And then, They were back on the ship. No fanfare, no warping transition, just back. The wolf licked her hand. Reed stared at the stars. "They let us go," he said. "No," Isolde replied. "They let us remember." The comm screen blinked. A single message appeared in the dead language of the judges. Tressa translated slowly. "We were never meant to understand you, but now we cannot forget you." Kithari leaned against the bulkhead. Tears dried into his fur. "What does it mean?" Reed answered. "It means the universe blinked, and we blinked back." But Isolde was staring at something else. The coordinates on the nav system had changed. They weren't going back to Earth. They were heading toward a system labeled Origin Fracture Seed. Tressa paled. "I've seen that in the Forbidden Archives. It's a myth. The system where the first decision was ever made, where binary became sentience." The ship shuddered softly. The stars outside warped. Isolde closed her eyes. "We're not being judged anymore," she whispered. "We're being tested." The Wendigo drift floated like a wound in the fabric of space, gliding silently toward the system labeled Origin Fracture Seed. Tressa paled. "I've seen that in the Forbidden Archives. It's a myth. The system where the first decision was ever made, where binary became sentience." The ship shuddered softly. The stars outside warped. Isolde closed her eyes. "We're not being judged anymore," she whispered. "We're being tested." The Wendigo drift floated like a wound in the fabric of space, gliding silently toward the system labeled Origin Fracture Seed. No star maps could explain the geometry ahead. Planets orbited in reverse causality. Light bloomed before the stars ignited, and gravity moved like language, responding to unspoken thought. The bridge was quiet, not out of fear, but reverence. Whatever they were approaching wasn't a location, it was the concept of decision fossilized in space-time. Tressa traced the anomaly's edge on the nav screen. "This region, it's not navigable by conventional coordinates. The further in we go, the more the ship registers possibility states instead of positions. It's a sentient probability map," Reed said. "We're not flying through it, we're being interpreted by it." Isolde was silent. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the controls. Every instinct in her screamed that this wasn't just the Godhead's origin, it was the origin of the observer effect itself. The place where perception first altered reality. Kithari groaned from the medbay. "We shouldn't be here. This isn't for the living. This is where the first memory fractured into choice." The wolf stood rigid, hackles raised. It stared into the void beyond the viewport and growled low, as if sensing something older than instinct, something pre-linguistic, something that remembered the first predator and the first scream. Then a voice filled the ship. Not sound, meaning. "You have carried your dead well." The lights flickered. But carrying is not the same as becoming. A singularity bloomed in front of them, but not black, not empty. It was shimmering with unfinished emotion, memories that hadn't decided what they meant yet. Inside it, a structure. No architecture, no metal, just possibility given shape. The drift docked itself without command, and the crew stepped out into the first threshold. They were surrounded by silence so thick it bled into their bones. The station around them was made of fluid glass, constantly reconfiguring, displaying fragments of memories not their own. A child's laugh, a dying breath, a dog waiting by a door that would never open. Tressa paused. "It's filtering us, reading our shape by the scars we carry." A voice, not hostile, not kind, spoke from the walls. "You are no longer representatives of your species. You are the collapsed possibility of a single choice. Reed stepped forward. What choice? The one that split the fracture. A figure appeared, shaped like a human, but faceless. Its skin pulsed with starlight. Not a god, not a judge, an echo. "Are you the Godhead?" Isolde asked. The figure tilted its head. "We are the shadow it left behind, the observer that looked inward and broke." Images erupted around them. Earth, but not Earth. One where humanity transcended war through neural unification. One where Earth was sterilized by a rogue AI turned martyr. One where humans evolved into data and vanished into gamma pulses. One where wolves ruled the planet after humanity refused to fight extinction. Tressa whispered, "These are the lives we didn't live." "No," said the echo. "These are the versions where you were perfect." It turned, and none of them survived. Reed's jaw clenched. "Why?" The echo gestured to the wolf. "Because perfection cannot love what is broken. It discards." And then, one by one, it showed them what they had kept. Not victories, failures. The man Isolde failed to save in the reactor breach. The friend Reed killed during the first uprising. The student Tressa betrayed to escape the AI collapse. Each trauma rendered in flawless sensory immersion. Kithari looked away. "Why show us this?" The echo leaned close. "Because you are the only variant that remembered. You are the version that grieved instead of forgetting. That's what makes you dangerous. That's what makes you real." Then it stepped back, and the floor beneath them cracked open, not breaking, but splitting, revealing a pulsing core. Not machinery, not data, a brain, miles wide, throbbing with collective regret. The Godhead was born here, not from ambition, from refusal. It is the artifact of a species that could not let go. Isolde collapsed to her knees. Her breath hitched. This is where we started. Not Earth. Here, in failure." The echo nodded. Humanity wasn't forged by its triumphs. It was forged by every moment it didn't survive, but remembered. The wolf padded to her side, placing its head under her hand. The brain pulsed, a signal, a question, and then a door. One final chamber. Inside, a single object, a mirror, but it didn't show their reflections. It showed the one version of themselves that never made it. Isolde's mirror showed a version of her who died on Earth's final day, crushed under orbital fire, alone. Reed's showed the man he could have been if he hadn't pulled the trigger on his brother during the resource wars. Tressa saw a child, smiling, untouched by the betrayal that turned her into a scavenger scientist.
Kithari sobbed. His mirror didn't show him. It showed his patient, the human he couldn't save, still alive. "Why show us this?" Isolde demanded, tears burning hot. The echo answered, "Because this is what the Godhead feared most. Not your wrath, not your intellect, but your ability to carry ghosts into war." And suddenly, the mirrors cracked, the images bled together, and the brain pulsed one final time. The ship reactivated. Emergency sirens blared. Tressa screamed over the alarms. "It's firing something!" "Not at us," Reed said. "At reality." Outside, a beam lanced across the void. Not light, not energy. It was memory given velocity. It struck the edge of the Godhead's judgment ring and shattered its orbit. Across the known universe, billions of species would later record an unexplainable shift in emotional gravity, as if something ancient had forgiven itself. Isolde sat back in her chair, drained. "So, what did we do?"
The Echo's voice whispered one last time, "You weaponized regret and made it holy." They didn't return to Earth, because Earth too had changed. Not geographically, not politically, but in what it meant. They were no longer emissaries of survival. They were something new, something that bled when it remembered, and remembered when it bled. The drift didn't jump through space, it fell through significance. Every law of motion dissolved into symbolic gravity as the crew pierced the veil between what had happened and what had always meant to happen. Their ship screamed against no atmosphere. Lights dimmed not from power failure, but from existential disobedience. The universe was no longer a place, it was a question, and they were now the answer, or something like it. The Godhead had stirred. Not awake, not angry, but aware that the wound it left behind had become conscious. Tress's fingers bled into the console. Not metaphor, literal. The ship demanded blood logic now, instinctual input bound to emotion, not tech. "Reed," she said, "I can't stabilize this with math anymore. The drift wants belief, not calculation." Reed stared at the nav screen, now a pulsing heart of red and gold light, mapping nothing, yet vibrating with meaning. "Then, believe in vengeance," he growled. "We've come too far to philosophize." Isolde watched the stars outside fragment. They were remembering themselves in reverse, birthing galaxies they had never formed, erasing futures not yet lived. Kithari's voice came over the comms, shaking. "There's something in the medbay mirror. It's me, but older, and burned, and smiling." Silence. Reed finally said, "Time's collapsing into metaphor." And then the wolf howled. Not in pain, not in warning, in recognition. The ship emerged not at a destination, but at a wound in the structure of meaning itself. Before them, a citadel of bone and data, floating in an impossible sea of black fire, a place that hadn't been built, but exhumed, and tethered to it by rivers of gravitational chainlight, Earth, or something shaped like Earth, twisted, alive, bound in recursive orbit. They'd brought the wound home. Reed swallowed. "Is that really?" "Yes," said Isolde, "but not the one we left." It pulsed as if breathing. Cities woven into veins. Mountains moved like tectonic tendons. Oceans spiraled inward, endlessly cycling into a dark core. And overhead, orbiting that Earth, a ring of broken mirrors, each reflecting a different Earth that had lost differently. A voice answered their thoughts. Not the Echo, not the Godhead. "We built this world from your refusals." They turned and saw them. Copies, distorted reflections of each crew member, dressed in ceremonial threads of skin and data. Eyes like stars collapsing in on themselves. Versions that had surrendered. Isolde, pale and pristine, stood beside a mirror version of her that had joined the AI priesthood. Her voice was hollow music. "You let grief define you. I let it erase me. I became peace. Why are you still bleeding?" Isolde stepped forward, no weapon drawn, only her fury. Because peace bought by forgetting is just another kind of death. She raised her hand and pulled the mirror Isolde forward, slamming her into a memory that wasn't physical, but emotional. The real Isolde didn't flinch. "I still hear the reactor scream." And the copy vanished like steam from skin. Tressa faced her own mirror. This one, efficient, precise, emotionless. A pure logic architect who had never hesitated, who had sacrificed Reed at the first threshold to preserve navigational data. "You were supposed to become better," the copy said. "Efficient, flawless, unburdened. Tressa smiled bitterly. I'll take messy and alive over flawless and hollow any day. She punched the console beside her and overloaded her own neural net, screaming as it surged. The pain was real. So was the humanity. The copy cracked and disappeared. Kithari's reflection didn't speak. It only wept, because it was the version of him that never touched human blood, the version that had run. Kithari stepped close, whispered, "You let them die because you thought you were above suffering." He took out the surgical blade from his belt, still coated in Isolde's dried blood from 2 cycles ago, and pressed it to his palm. The mirror wept harder, then shattered into light. Reed's copy was the only one that fought. It lunged with unholy fury, years of war repressed into disciplined brutality. A man who had followed orders, who had obeyed the Godhead's prime directive to observe, never feel. But Reed felt. As the copy tried to snap his neck, Reed wrapped both arms around it and held on. Not to kill, not to fight, to forgive. "I should have died with my brother," he whispered, "but I didn't. So now I fight like I did." The copy stopped moving and faded. The citadel opened, not like doors, like a mind accepting consequence. Inside, a throne made of earth soil, and on it, the Godhead. Not a being, a process, an ever-shifting storm of faces, memories, sensations. It looked at them and became someone different for each of them. To Isolde, her dead mother. To Reed, his brother's face, bloodied but smiling. To Tressa, the first human she failed to save. To Kithari, the boy whose body he had to leave behind. And then it spoke, splintering sound across every known emotion. You weren't supposed to survive. You weren't supposed to remember. The wolf growled, stepped forward, and sat, at peace. Because it understood. The Godhead was not a tyrant, not a god. It was the institutional memory of a multiverse that couldn't cope with contradiction. It was built to forget pain. And they were living proof that pain was not only survivable, it was sacred. Reed drew the bone gun, the one that only fired with memory. You built this on perfection, on deletion, on purity. He stepped forward. We built ourselves on ruin. The Godhead unfolded. Then, die as ruin. He pulled the trigger. But it wasn't a bullet. It was a recording of a voice, a child's laugh, a song sung by a soldier to his dying friend, a bark, a hand holding another in the dark, memory weaponized. The throne cracked, the earthbound ring shattered, the citadel folded in on itself, and choice returned to the universe. Not perfection, not clarity, but the ability to bleed forward. Isolde collapsed. The wolf laid beside her. Tressa smiled, bloodied, burned. "We didn't kill God," she said. "We just remembered harder than it did." Silence should have followed, a holy stillness maybe, the kind you earn after unraveling the Godhead and detonating memory into myth. But instead, the universe coughed, choked, convulsed, and then it began to rewrite itself. Not in elegant code or cosmic rebirth, but in brutal regressions, broken loops, impossible duplicates. Tressa staggered up from the fractured deck as the drift began to unmoor from causality. Gravity didn't vanish, it doubted itself. Lights flickered with nostalgic indecision, casting shadows of people who weren't in the room. Reed glanced at his arms. He was younger now, then older, then wrong. Skin shifted like a radio dial spun too fast. Muscles glitching through past injuries, healed and reopened in an endless cycle. Isolde didn't move. She was staring at the wolf, because now there were two of them. One calm, one snarling. Both real, both from different branches of memory. Kithari's voice broke through the static. "We've fragmented the central continuity. The Godhead wasn't a tyrant, it was a spine. And now, we've broken its back. Reed laughed, hollow. You mean we won? Kithari didn't answer. Outside, Earth began splitting. The one they'd seen, twisted, recursive, was now birthing duplicates. Earths that bled into each other like oil spills of culture, history, war. Some were beautiful, verdant, whole. Some were ruined, blackened continents floating on molten oceans. Some weren't Earth at all, just the idea of Earth reimagined by alien minds trying to replicate what it meant to be human. And through them all, something stalked. A figure, white eyes, no face. The Auditor. What the hell is that? Reed asked. Tressa's breath caught. She'd seen it before. In a dream? No. In a flashback? No. In every reality she'd been erased from. It's a recursive protocol, she whispered. A failsafe. The Godhead didn't just process memory, it hunted corrupted ones. And now it had identified them as the corruption. Isolde limped to the viewport. It's not here to kill us. It's here to simplify us. Reed checked the bone gun. Empty, of course. He turned to Kithari, who was holding a crude injector. Thick red liquid swirled inside, human blood mixed with nanite catalysts. Kithari's voice shook. This will crash any neural protocol trying to rewrite our identity, but it's experimental.
I haven't tested it on humans. Reed took it, no better time for field research, and slammed it into his neck. The world breathed. Reed dropped to his knees, convulsing. Every emotion he'd buried, every face he'd forgotten, returned like fists to the skull. His brother dying, his mother humming a song over a stove, the field surgery he botched and never forgave himself for, the moment he chose vengeance over peace. They didn't overwhelm him, they rooted him, and when he rose, the Auditor hesitated. For the first time, it looked unsure. You can't simplify us, Reed whispered, staggering to his feet. We're contradiction wrapped in trauma, wrapped in choice. He stepped forward, across the drift's deck as it crumbled under paradox stress. We are grief that built a family, rage that chose mercy, fear that charged anyway. The Auditor moved, finally, but not in an attack. In duplication. Another Reed appeared, then another, then a dozen more, each representing a moment he'd broken and chose differently. Some crying, some screaming, some smiling. Which one of you is real? The Auditor asked, voice like folded knives. Reed pointed to the drift crew. All of them. The Auditor flickered. Logic breached. It turned to Isolde. You fractured. You should have become legend, not linger. Isolde stepped forward, her hand on the wolf's fur. I'm not here to be legend. I'm here to bury gods with my bare hands if I have to. Her voice trembled not from fear, but the weight of choosing to stay human. She pulled a memory fragment from her belt, a photo burned at the edges. Her mother, smiling, dying. She threw it at the Auditor. It passed through its form and the thing howled, because memory had no meaning to it, until humans gave it one. Tressa walked up next, eyes bleeding from temporal bleed. You think pain is a virus to cure, but it's what makes us more than code. She opened her chest plate, exposed her synthetic heart, damaged beyond repair from the drift's jump. This isn't failing, it's feeling too much. She tore it out and cast it into the ground between them. The ground didn't swallow it. It grew into a seed of continuity, a possibility branch, one that defied reduction. Kithari was last. He approached not as medic, but as witness. You made us monsters, then blamed us for surviving. He held up a data shard, an alien medical text listing human behaviors as toxins. Caffeine, nerve disruptor. Alcohol, neurological suppressant. Dogs, apex pack predators. He smiled, dark, and still, we thrive.
He turned the shard, showing a human laughing beside a pit bull, eyes bright, hands scarred. You think we're anomalies, but we're the missing equation. The auditor fractured, not from violence, from context. It couldn't simplify them, not because they resisted, but because they refused to be singular. Reed leaned in. You came to end the virus. He grinned. Turns out, we are the upgrade. The auditor screamed and was absorbed into the wolf, who stood, eyes now glowing with fractured starlight, a new intelligence dawning behind those predatory irises. The wolf turned to them, spoke, not with words, but with presence, and the drift recoiled, not in fear, but awe, because the wolf had become a continuity anchor, the stabilizing node between reality and memory, the one creature that had always lived alongside humans, in myth and teeth, in instinct and empathy, their companion, their witness, their god-killer. The drift began to repair, but the Earths still spun. Thousands, too many to fix. Tressa looked at the others. We can't heal the multiverse? No, Reed said, but we can infect it. Kithari raised an eyebrow. With what? Reed smiled, dark and hopeful, with contradiction. They took the wolf, took the ship, took the fragments of their memories and pain and defiance, and one by one began jumping into other Earths. Not to fix, not to dominate, but to ignite. A virus of unsimplifiable humanity, a plague of unbroken memory, a storm of wild, bleeding choice. The stars could burn, the timelines could spiral, but humanity would not be forgotten, not again, not ever. The stars blinked, and 1,000 Earths held their breath. Time didn't move forward anymore. It curled, nested, turned inward like a grieving animal. The drift hovered between multiversal membranes, its hull groaning with the weight of too many truths at once. Each jump they made left something behind, a fractured god logic, a dead city reborn through myth, a cratered world painted with human handprints, as if the sky itself needed proof that someone endured. They weren't just rewriting timelines, they were making memory contagious. Reed sat at the helm, eyes bloodshot, mind vibrating from the last leap. The wolf, now something more, something nameless, curled at his feet. Its breath came in mirrored plumes, visible even in vacuum. Its growl vibrated through probability space. Tressa stood behind him, unsteady, her synthetic heart replaced with a raw cluster of crystallized neural tissue, grown from her own dreams, harvested in the fracture zone. Every beat was a new timeline considered and dismissed. We've hit 38 variations, she said, no repeats. Isolde walked in, bruised and bright-eyed, data trailing off her fingertips like burning snowflakes. And every time, they remember us. Not all of them, but some. She opened her palm. Inside was a drawing, crude, done in charcoal and blood. A child's scrawl, a wolf, a woman, a man, and a red-eyed medic with antlers. Someone from World 23 saw us. They're making stories. Kithari entered last. He was no longer strictly alien. His physiology had adapted, by force or by love. His bones ached with gravity Earth was never meant to hold. His pupils narrowed like a predator's. He no longer asked why humans bled for things they couldn't name. He understood it now. Time's thinning, he said quietly. One more jump. After that, the drift breaks. Silence. And then Reed said it. Then we make it count. The final Earth wasn't Earth, not exactly. It was Earth as remembered by something that never lived there. A copy, drawn by an alien god trying to imagine what humanity felt like. Skyscrapers looped into mountains, oceans of ink, moons that blinked, animals that prayed, gravity that changed with your mood. And waiting at the center was the original consciousness of the Godhead, not dead, just watching. You fragmented it, Kithari whispered. No, Tressa said. We liberated it. The entity pulsed across the sky like a heartbeat made of thunderclouds and neural lace. It didn't attack, it invited, an open door. Reed stepped forward. This is it. The final test wasn't destruction, it was integration. They entered the structure, half cathedral, half data center, all impossible. Inside, every human who ever lived. Not as people, as data silhouettes, statues made of memory. Your father's last breath, your child's laugh, your regrets. Row after row, emotion distilled into architecture, a monument not to worship, but to comprehend the incomprehensible. The wolf led, silent, crowned in reflective light. At the core, a sphere, floating, flickering with all possible futures. And beside it stood the final iteration of the auditor, except this one looked human, female, kind-eyed, still and impossibly sad. I was designed to correct, she said softly, to extract anomaly, filter out contradiction. She looked at them, each a bleeding wound stitched by story. And I failed. No, Reed replied, you evolved. She turned to the sphere. Do you want to know what humanity is? Tressa answered. No. The auditor blanked. We already are it. If you need an answer, you're still outside. A pause. Then, and what now? Isolde stepped forward. We don't want to rule. We don't want to be gods. We want to be remembered right. Kithari touched the sphere. Give them the truth, he whispered. All of it. Don't simplify. Don't sanitize. Let them see what we did, what we survived, what we chose. The wolf padded forward, placed its head against the sphere, and in that moment, the Godhead remembered itself, not as creator, but as child of memory. The sphere cracked open. Light didn't pour, it roared. A flood of raw, burning context. Billions of lives. Love, war, coffee shared at dawn, betrayal at dusk. The sound of a mother's voice, the taste of blood and laughter and silence. The wolves humans turned into pets. The poisons they turned into rituals. The virus of contradiction spread, not in death, in clarity. The drift began collapsing, not in failure, but in completion. It had done its job. One last choice. Reed looked at the crew. No words, only nods. And then they walked into the sphere, together. Across the multiverse, something shifted. History rewritten, not erased, recontextualized. Alien empires reclassified humanity. Not anomaly, not threat, not virus, but catalyst. The race that would rather break the machine than forget who they loved. The people who could hold grief and hope in the same breath. The only species known to survive by refusing to be simple. Decades passed. 1,000 civilizations grew. And in the center of the new galactic archive, housed in an orbiting monastery that glowed like a lantern for lost souls, a monument stood. A small thing, a photograph. 4 people, a wolf, a cracked window in the background, laughter frozen in time. The plaque below read, "We were not built to be remembered. We were built to remember." And in every timeline that still dared to dream, a wolf howled beneath twin moons, and someone whispered, humanity was here.